Throughout the history of the NHL, there have been so many draft busts, it's just part of pro sports. It doesn't matter how much time and effort is put into scouting a player's future in the NHL is never guaranteed. You have no idea how a player will perform at the highest level. It's a pure gamble. Now, we've seen some highly touted players drafted into the league who never played a single game in the NHL, so keeping that in mind, in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the worst draft bust for all 32 NHL teams. The Anaheim Ducks, Stanislav Chistov. Drafted 5th overall in 2001, Chistov was actually ranked higher than Minnesota Wild legend Mikko Koivu. The Ducks looked like geniuses when Chistov went on to have a sensational rookie year in the Russian Super League. He was finally able to start his NHL career in the 2002-2003 season. Chistov, like many other European players, struggled to adjust to the North American rinks. He scored 30 points in his Ducks debut season in 79 games played. Over the 21 postseason games that led to the Ducks' first Western Conference championship, Chistov chipped in an additional 6 points. Unfortunately for him and the Ducks, that was the pinnacle of his career. Chistov would only play another 56 games for Anaheim, collecting 18 points before his demotion to the AHL. He had another 60-game NHL stint during the 2006-2007 season with the Boston Bruins. Eventually, he moved on to the KHL, never able to capture the magic of his rookie season. The Arizona Coyotes, Blake Wheeler. Selected 5th overall in 2004, the Coyote scouts were not wrong about Blake Wheeler's talent. The power forward from Minnesota has gone on to tally 922 points in 1,124 NHL games played through an amazing 17-year career. So how the heck is Blake Wheeler a bust? Well, he is certainly a bust for the Coyotes because they couldn't sign him to a contract when he came out of the University of Minnesota after the 2007-2008 season. As compensation for failing to sign Wheeler, the Coyotes received the 35th pick in the 2008 draft, which they then flipped to Anaheim in a package to acquire the 28th pick. With that selection, they drafted forward Viktor Tikhonov, and he just lasted one season with the organization before returning to Russia. After signing as a free agent with the Boston Bruins, Wheeler was dealt to the then Atlanta Thrashers in February of 2011. Wheeler enjoyed great success with the Thrashers and Winnipeg organizations, which has to hurt for the Coyotes. Notable players that were selected after Wheeler and that the Coyotes could have selected are Drew Stafford, Travis Zajac, Corey Schneider, Mike Green, and David Krejci. The Boston Bruins, Lars Johnson. The Bruins got the 7th overall pick after their poor finish in the 1999-2000 season. With that pick, the Bruins decided to select Lars Johnson, the defenseman out of Sweden. The 6'2", 207-pound defenseman was described by elite prospects as a defenseman with good size and offensive skills. It was also said that he is a very smooth skater and can bring the puck up the ice efficiently. He has good hands and a very hard shot. He was looked at to be a power play asset. Based on all that information, it seems like Johnson would have been a pretty good player for the Bruins. However, in reality, he never lived up to the hype and he never suited up for a game with the Boston Bruins. Johnson played just 8 games in the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers and 84 in the AHL before returning home to play in Sweden. The Buffalo Sabres, Marek Zagrapan. Marek Zagrapan, drafted 13th overall in the 2005 NHL Draft, was a player who the Sabres spent a lot of time and effort trying to get him acclimated to the North American style of play. They drafted him out of the QMJHL as he was trying to lose the habits that came with playing in Slovakia. 1 year after the draft, he went to play in the AHL. No, he did not struggle too much in the minors. He actually scored 38 points, including 17 goals in his first season. In his second year, he actually did a little better, scoring 18 goals for 40 points. Then, in his third year in the AHL, he set a career high with 49 points and 21 goals. It seemed like he was developing just as planned. But then, right before the offseason in 2009, he surprisingly signed a deal with the KHL, and the Sabres ended up getting 0 NHL games from him and were blindsided by his departure. There were not a ton of talented players taken in the first round of the 2005 draft, but the Sabres did leave Tuukka Rask, TJ Oshie, and Martin Hanzal on the board in order to take Zagrapan. The Calgary Flames, Daniel Tkachuk. With the 6th overall pick in the 1997 NHL Draft, the Calgary Flames took Daniel Tkachuk, a centerman out of the OHL. He had some solid numbers in the OHL, however, that just never translated into NHL success. He ended up playing just 1 season with the Flames in the 2000-2001 season, getting into 19 games and putting up an actual impressive 11 points. However, following that season, he never played in the NHL again, bouncing around the AHL and various leagues in Europe before retiring in 2011. He is arguably the biggest draft bust in Flames history because the very next pick, the Tampa Bay Lightning took Paul Mara, who ended up playing 734 NHL games. And then after that, the Bruins picked Sergei Samsonov, who posted 571 points in 888 NHL games. Then, adding salt to the wound, the Flames also left Marian Hossa up on the board, who was selected 12th overall. The Carolina Hurricanes, Igor Knyzhov. The first 14 players selected in the 2001 NHL draft averaged 537 games played in the NHL. Then the Carolina Hurricanes selected defenseman Igor Knyzhov at the 15th spot, and he never matched the 14 players before him. Full disclosure, there is not a lot of video of Igor, and I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, so we're going to power through this real quick and move on to the next one. Igor Knyzhov was a shutdown defenseman who was playing well in Russia. He was rising up the ranks in the Russian Super League, and many NHL teams were sending over scouts to have a look. He seemed like he was willing to come to North America, and he even played a few seasons in the AHL, but the second it didn't seem like it was working out for him here, he raced back to Russia and never returned. Igor spent 2 seasons playing in the AHL, tallying 14 points, but finishing with a horrendous -32. The Chicago Blackhawks, Kyle Beach. Selected 11th overall in the 2008 draft, power forward Kyle Beach was a wild card in 2008. He was known as a player to have some issues with a bad temperament, which is the reason why he was not selected in the top 10. However, the Blackhawks took a chance on Beach, but he never made it out of the minor leagues. Beach managed 2 16-goal seasons in his 3 years with the Rockford Ice Hogs before he was dealt to the New York Rangers organization in December of 2013. Over subsequent seasons, Beach never saw a minute at the NHL level, mostly playing in the American Hockey League, European leagues, and is now playing pro in Germany. The Colorado Avalanche, Joey Hishon. Joey Hishon was drafted by the Avalanche in the first round, 17th overall in the 2010 NHL draft. With a fallen ranking of 55th by the NHL Central Scouting Final Grades, Hishon was surprisingly taken in the first round, 17th overall by the Avalanche. During the course of the 2010-2011 OHL season, Hishon was signed to a 3-year entry-level contract with the Avalanche. Unfortunately, during the 2011 Memorial Cup, Hishon was struck by an illegal elbow blow to the head by Braden McNabb, which left Hishon with a concussion. He ended up missing the rest of the Memorial Cup and the entire 2011-2012 season with post-concussion syndrome. Hishon's recovery extended into the following 2012-2013 season before he was cleared for non-contact practice with the Avalanche's AHL affiliate. Hishon was finally scheduled to make his long-awaited professional debut on March 19, 2013 against the Toronto Marlies. It marked a return from his concussion just 2 months shy of 2 years. In his 5th game, Hishon scored his first professional goal in a multi-point effort against the Chicago Wolves on March 29, 2013. However, on April 12th, in his 9th game, and on his first shift against the Hamilton Bulldogs, Hishon's season was ended after he suffered a second concussion. With an early prognosis of a less severe concussion than previously endured, it was anticipated Hishon would recover in time to prepare for the following season. Hishon went on to play the majority of the 2013-2014 season, scoring 10 goals and 24 points, despite missing 26 games due to injury. He was an emergency call-up during the first round of the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs, debuting in Game 4 against the Minnesota Wild. In the 2014-2015 season, Hishon played primarily for the Lake Erie Monsters in the AHL, playing 53 games and scoring 16 goals and 36 points. Then, in March of 2015, he was called up to the Avalanche. He scored his first NHL goal against Pekka Rinne of the Nashville Predators. In the 2015-2016 campaign, Hishon made 62 appearances in the AHL, but unfortunately never earned another crack at an NHL roster. The Columbus Blue Jackets, Gilbert Brulé. Following the cancellation of the 2004-2005 NHL season due to the lockout, the league drew weighted lottery balls for every team in the league prior to the 2005 NHL draft, with the Blue Jackets winning the 6th pick. Heading into the draft with a somewhat clear top 5, this left the team seemingly just barely on the outside until the Montreal Canadiens surprised many by taking goaltender Carey Price, allowing Gilbert Brulé to fall right into the lap of the Blue Jackets. At first glance, this pick seemed like a dream come true. Gilbert was coming off a 39-goal, 87-point season with the Vancouver Giants and looked like the next coming of Jeremy Roenick. He was a tremendous playmaker, playing at the junior level, slinging highlight reel passes, and playing an exciting physical brand of hockey for a relatively smaller player. It finally seemed like the Blue Jackets had a legitimate potential top-line center at their disposal. But for Brule and the Blue Jackets, it just wasn't meant to be. They rushed him into the NHL way too early, and after just skating in 7 games in the fall of 2005, Brule was returned to Vancouver, where he finished out the year on a high note, scoring 23 goals and 38 points in 27 games. Unfortunately for Brule, he was never quite the same player at the pro level, spending just 2 seasons with the Blue Jackets before being dealt to the Oilers in exchange for Raffi Torres. Gilbert Brule went on to play 299 games in the NHL, scoring 43 goals and 156 points for the Blue Jackets, Oilers, and Coyotes. So sure, his career could have been much worse, but he was anticipated to be a top-line centerman, but he just never came close to that. The Dallas Stars, Brian Lawton. With a rich crop of young talent, including Steve Yzerman, Pat LaFontaine, Sylvain Turgeon, and Tom Barrasso, the Minnesota North Stars used their first overall pick to select Brian Lawton in the 1983 NHL Draft. Lawton's rookie season was less than spectacular as he notched 10 goals and 21 assists in 58 games played. Unfortunately, he would only become a role player for the North Stars for 5 seasons, scoring 20 goals once before moving to the New York Rangers in 1988. He would spend parts of the next 5 seasons playing for the Hartford Whalers, Quebec Nordiques, Boston Bruins, and the San Jose Sharks before retiring from hockey altogether. Now, for him to be your first overall pick while leaving Yzerman and LaFontaine on the board, that is a huge loss for the Dallas Stars franchise. The Detroit Red Wings, Corey Kocur. Now, you're going to have to bear with us with this one again because there unfortunately is not a lot of video on Corey Kocur. So we're going to have to make this one quick. He was the cousin of Wendell Clark and was expected to be a point-per-game player. Corey Kocur even surpassed triple digits, posting 102 points in his final year in Saskatoon, playing in the WHL. The Detroit Red Wings selected Corey Kocur 17th overall in the 1988 draft. Unfortunately, after 2 short years in the AHL, he was demoted to the IHL Fort Wayne team. He spent the next 2 years there with a short 2-game AHL call-up before calling it quits in the 92-93 season. Corey never played a single NHL game in his entire career. Other notable players taken after him in this draft were Ty Domi taken at the 27th pick, Mark Recchi taken 67th overall, and Rob Blake taken 70th overall. The Edmonton Oilers, Jesse Niinimäki. Now, obviously, Nail Yakupov is fresh on our minds as being the poster boy of Edmonton Oilers draft busts, and as much as he disappointed the Edmonton franchise, at least Nail Yakupov played in the NHL and put up some points. The same cannot be said about Jesse Niinimäki. Drafted 15th overall in 2002, Jesse Niinimäki just spent 27 games in North America, playing with the short-lived Edmonton Roadrunners franchise during their only AHL season, which coincided in the 2004-2005 NHL lockout. When the NHL resumed play in the 2005-2006 season, Niinimäki returned to Europe. He played the rest of his career playing in the Finnish, Swedish, and Swiss leagues and spent the 2015-2016 season playing in Italy as a 32-year-old. The Edmonton Oilers got a measly 1 AHL season from Niinimäki, while other notable players taken after him in the draft include Alexander Steen taken at 24th, Cam Ward at 25th, Jarrett Stoll at 36th, Trevor Daley at 43rd, Duncan Keith at 54th, and Matt Stajan at 57th. Literally any of those players would have been way better than Niinimäki. The Florida Panthers, Peter Tatacek. For the most part, the Panthers' first-round picks have been pretty solid, but one notable top 10 miss was Czech centerman Peter Tatacek. Tatacek was the Florida Panthers' second first-round pick in the 2002 draft. They first drafted at number 3 Jay Bouwmeester, which obviously paid off, but then they drafted Peter Tatacek at the 9th spot. During his first season in North America, Tatacek scored 21 goals and tallied 63 points with the OHL Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds and was ranked 7 among North American skaters in the Central Scouting Draft rankings. After turning pro in 2003 at age 20, Tatacek played 2 seasons in the AHL before making his NHL debut with the Panthers. He just lasted 3 games with the squad. In March of 2006, the Panthers then traded Tatacek to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Richard Jackman, who in return only played 22 games in Florida. As for Tatacek, well, by the 2006-2007 season, he was back playing in the Czech Republic. He went on to play 8 years in Switzerland and then suited up in the German league. The LA Kings, Lauri Tukkanen. The 2004 draft had some elite talent, starting off with the top two names being Alex Ovechkin and Evgeny Malkin. At 5th on the list was Finnish winger Lauri Tukkonen, a prodigy who had skated in the Finnish men's league as a 17-year-old. Tukkonen stayed with his Finnish team for 1 year after being drafted in the NHL, then joined the Manchester Monarchs, where he stayed for most of the next 3 seasons. His production was modest in the AHL, and he didn't record a single point during his brief call-ups with the LA Kings. By the 2008-2009 season, Tukkonen found himself back playing in the Finnish league. The Minnesota Wild, A.J. Thielen. A.J. Thielen proved to be a major disappointment when he failed to develop into an NHL player. The big, smooth-skating D-man was drafted after his freshman season at Michigan State, 12th overall in the 2004 NHL Draft. In 2005, A.J. Thielen was dismissed from the Michigan State University program due to a dispute between him and his head coach Rick Comley. After leaving school, Thielen spent the next 2 junior-eligible seasons in the WHL, an experience that culminated with a Memorial Cup win with the Vancouver Giants in 2007. However, the Wild still chose not to offer Thielen an entry-level contract. He then spent 4 seasons playing in the minors, primarily in the ECHL, before retiring from hockey at age 25. The Montreal Canadiens' Brent Bilodeau. Maybe Brent Bilodeau just had horrible luck when he was taken 17th overall in the 1991 NHL Draft. Sandwiched between the Pittsburgh Penguins' Marcus Naslund and the Boston Bruins' Glenn Murray, Bilodeau is the only 1991 first-round pick to never play a single NHL game. Looking for a stay-at-home defenseman, the Habs could have saved themselves a lot of time by just taking Jason Cullimore with their pick, who was taken 29th overall by the Vancouver Canucks, but ended up being traded to the Habs anyway for Donald Brashear in 1996. Now, Cullimore wasn't exactly a standout D-man in the NHL. However, he did play 812 career games, which is 812 more games than Bilodeau played to be exact. The Habs could have easily picked anybody else and would have had way more luck. Other players that were left on the board that Montreal could have drafted are Glenn Murray going 18th overall, Martin Ruchinski going 20th overall, Ray Whitney going 23rd overall, and Zygmunt Palffy going 26th. The Nashville Predators, Alexander Radulov. In 2004, the Nashville Predators selected Alexander Radulov with their 15th pick in the NHL Draft. Radulov played for 2 seasons in the QMJHL after being drafted, scoring at will, but unfortunately garnered a lot of attention with his on-ice antics. His type of play didn't seem to mesh well with the typical Predators players. Radulov's offensive talent was clearly on display during his time in Nashville, but after 2 seasons, he left for the KHL during the summer of 2008, despite having 1 more year on his contract. The KHL contract he signed was still allowed to stand, and Radulov played 4 seasons in Russia before announcing his intention to return back to the Preds for the end of the 2011-2012 season. But then once again, his time in Nashville ended in disappointment. He was suspended by the team for Game 3 of the second-round playoff series against the Phoenix Coyotes after he broke curfew before Game 2. The Predators went on to lose the series, and the team then announced it would not be offering Radulov a new contract, making him a free agent. The New Jersey Devils, Neil Brady. When it comes to blowing a pick, missing hard on a player taken 3rd overall can set a franchise back several years. Luckily for the Devils, after the 1986 draft where they took Neil Brady 3rd overall, they were able to get their head on straight and made some great picks. However, taking Neil Brady 3rd overall was the biggest mistake the Devils ever made. Brady was a scoring machine for the Medicine Hat Tigers, hitting 80-plus points 2 seasons in a row. However, his numbers did struggle in his last season in juniors, and the Devils brought him to Utica in 1988. The Devils thought he'd eventually find his scoring touch once again, but it just never happened. He only played 29 games in New Jersey before the Ottawa Senators took him in the expansion draft. Then the Senators gave him a legitimate shot to be an everyday starter, but it was a disappointment as he just scored 7 goals in his first season with the team. The New York Islanders, Dave Chizowski. 1989 was a wonderful draft year except for the Islanders when they swung and missed with Dave Chizowski taking him 2nd overall. Chizowski was dominant in his junior days, scoring 56 goals and 104 points. The Islanders were hoping that he would turn into that same player at the NHL level, but unfortunately, Chizowski could not perform like we've seen top 3 draft picks perform before. In 126 games, Chizowski posted 15 goals and 31 points, but actually ended up carving out an exceptional career in the minor leagues. In 571 games in the minors, he posted 443 points, including 3 30-plus goal seasons and a 40-goal season before finishing off his career playing in Austria. Now, players like Chisowski are incredibly useful for teams, but given that he was drafted 3rd overall, he has to be labeled a bust. The New York Rangers, Hugh Jessamine. The Rangers had high hopes for towering power forward Hugh Jessamine when they drafted him 12th overall in 2003. His playing size is listed as 6'6" and weighed in at 231 pounds. However, Jessamine never played an NHL game for the Rangers. After 3 seasons in college, he started his pro career after the conclusion of the 2004-2005 NHL lockout, but failed to make a strong impression. Jessamine bounced back and forth between the AHL Hartford Wolfpack and the ECHL Charlotte Checkers for 2 seasons before becoming a full-time player in Hartford. In October of 2008, Jessamine was dealt to the Nashville Predators for future considerations. He went on to spend some time as part of the Chicago Blackhawks, Florida Panthers, and the Ottawa Senators organizations, playing his only 2 NHL games with the Panthers in 2010-2011. After 8 seasons and 498 games in the AHL, Jessamine headed to Europe in the 2013-2014 season. His hockey career ended after 1 season in the KHL, and he also had a brief appearance playing in the Austrian League. The Ottawa Senators, Alexander Daigle. Expected to be the next French-Canadian superstar, Alexander Daigle was widely considered to be a can't-miss prospect who would take the league by storm. So the Ottawa Senators selected him 1st overall in the 1993 NHL draft. However, he never displayed the kind of speed and playmaking instincts that earned him comparisons to the likes of Pat LaFontaine, Joe Sakic, and Steve Yzerman. Despite a rookie season with 20 goals and 51 points, Alexander Daigle managed just 129 goals and 327 points in his 616-game career and never topped the 26-goal mark in a single season, earning him the reputation as the poster boy for an NHL bust. Making things worse, Chris Pronger was selected just after him as number 2 in that draft, and Paul Kariya went at number 4. The Philadelphia Flyers, Nolan Patrick. Flyers GM Ron Hextall used the number 2 pick in the 2017 NHL draft to select Nolan Patrick. Now, both Miro Heiskanen, who was selected 3rd, and Elias Pettersson, who was selected 5th, did not crack their team's respected NHL rosters until the start of the 2018-2019 season, and Cale Makar, who was taken 4th overall, didn't become a full-time NHLer until the 2019-2020 season. However, looking at the impact these players have in the league today, the Philadelphia Flyers clearly made a mistake. The jump from number 13 to number 2 in the draft lottery in 2017 was supposed to be the Flyers' long-awaited lucky break, an opportunity to acquire a top-of-the-line franchise player. Instead, Nolan Patrick this far has been an NHL bust. He finished with 70 points in 197 games with the Flyers before getting shipped out in a trade for Ryan Ellis. In the 2021-22 season, he appeared in just 25 games for the Vegas Golden Knights due to an injury and had 7 points. Since that injury, Nolan Patrick has not played a single NHL game. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Angelo Esposito. One of the brightest prospects of his era in Quebec, Angelo Esposito captained Canadian teams to 2 gold medals in 2006. Hopes were certainly high for Esposito, but his stock declined in his draft year after his point totals dropped from 98 to 79 in the 2006-2007 season. The Penguins had enough faith to draft him in the 20th spot of the 2007 NHL draft. However, just 7 months after he was drafted, he was included in the trade deadline package that Pittsburgh sent to the Atlanta Thrashers to acquire Marian Hossa and Pascal Dupuis, which fueled their run to the 2008 Stanley Cup Final. While playing primarily in the AHL, Esposito was subsequently traded to the Florida Panthers in 2011, then to the Dallas Stars in 2012. Since then, he spent most of his years playing in Europe. The San Jose Sharks, Devin Setoguchi. Even though Setoguchi played a fair amount for the Sharks, he never did quite live up to the hype. The San Jose Sharks selected Devin Setoguchi 8th overall in the 2005 NHL draft. In his best season with the Sharks, he put up 65 points in the 2008-2009 season. Injuries limited his next 2 seasons, and during the 2011 draft, the Sharks traded Setoguchi, Charlie Coyle, and their 2011 first-round pick to the Minnesota Wild for Brent Burns. That 2011 pick ended up being 28th overall and used on Zach Phillips, who never played an NHL game. Coyle has been a serviceable player who is still in the league. However, Setoguchi was out of the league by 2012 without leaving much of an impact after that 2008-2009 season. In the end, the Sharks did well to acquire Brent Burns, but with that 8th pick, they had the pick of the litter, leaving Anze Kopitar, Tuukka Rask, TJ Oshie, Matt Niskanen, Andrew Cogliano, Keith Yandel, Chris Letang, Paul Stastny, and James Neal all on the board. The Seattle Kraken, Shane Wright. Now this just seems unfair as the Seattle Kraken are only in year 3 of being an NHL franchise, but heck, we're here so we might as well take a look at what has happened in the early stages of Shane Wright's career. Shane Wright's pro career has been a roller coaster to say the least. He made headlines at the 2022 draft, but not because he was selected first overall like he was projected to, but in fact he slipped to the 4th pick of the draft, landing with the Seattle Kraken. Wright's NHL career did not start the way he had hoped. He appeared in 8 games for the Kraken, scoring 2 points and being a healthy scratch most nights before the Kraken sent him down to the minors, where he looked more comfortable scoring 4 goals in 5 games. When he returned to the Kraken, he scored his first NHL goal in a revenge game against the Montreal Canadiens, who were predicted to take him first overall that year. Unlike many top picks in recent years, Shane Wright hasn't shown right away that he's a consistent NHL player, leading many fans to ask the question, is Shane Wright a bust? At Wright's age, it's reasonable to say that he hasn't lived up to expectations in his short career. However, his shortcomings could be more a product of the Kraken's development of Wright rather than his abilities. Right now, unfortunately, Shane Wright seems to be leaning towards being a bust, but only time will tell. The St. Louis Blues, Marek Schwartz. Marek Schwartz had made a splash in the Czech men's league as a 17-year-old, prompting hopes that he might be the next Dominik Hasek. After being drafted 17th overall in 2004, he spent his first season in North America with the Vancouver Giants of the WHL, but then returned to the Czech Republic for a year as a 19-year-old in the 2005-2006 season. The following season, he signed a pro contract and started his career in the AHL. He got into action in 2 NHL games as a call-up with the Blues, a pattern that continued in his 2 subsequent seasons, as he spent most of his time playing in the AHL and the ECHL. After his entry-level contract expired at the end of the 2008-2009 season, Schwartz then returned to Europe, never to play an NHL game ever again. The Tampa Bay Lightning, Alex Svitov. In the 2001 NHL draft, Ilya Kovalchuk and Jason Spezza were taken 1st and 2nd overall. But what happened with that 3rd pick? Well, Alex Svitov was drafted by the Lightning with the hopes that he'd be a great physically gifted centerman. Instead, what they got with the 3rd pick was one disappointing season where Svitov moved between the NHL and AHL, producing only 8 points in 63 games played with the Lightning. He was then traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets the following season, where he then again bounced back down to the AHL while still putting up bottom of the barrel numbers until he decided to return to play in Russia in 2007. While his 37 points in 179 games played is not the worst on this list, Alex Svitov being a top 3 pick while having little to no impact at the NHL level is just embarrassing. The Toronto Maple Leafs, Tyler Biggs. One of Toronto Maple Leafs GM Brian Burke's professional lowlights was selecting the big physical American right winger Tyler Biggs 22nd overall in 2011. Biggs was coming off a year that had seen him score 5 goals and 10 points at the 2010 World Under-17 Hockey Challenge, spearheading the American squad to a gold medal. Biggs was expected to become a premier forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs using his physicality and goal-scoring abilities. Like many Leafs prospects do, Biggs started out playing with the Marlies, but his lack of production kept him down there. He spent a promising year as an Oshawa General in the OHL before he turned pro with the Marlies in 2013, but only managed 14 points in 104 games in the AHL. Biggs never did make it in the NHL, but he didn't give up on hockey as he went on to play in the ECHL. Players taken after Biggs include Ricard Raquel, John Gibson, William Karlsson, and Nikita Kucherov. The Vancouver Canucks, Patrick White. Patrick White led off a remarkable 2007 draft for the Vancouver Canucks, where not one of the 6 players selected skated in even a single NHL game. The Canucks were looking for depth at their center position behind Henrik Sedin and Brendan Morrison when they targeted White. After being drafted, White moved on to the University of Minnesota, but then struggled to earn ice time. In his sophomore season in the 2008-2009 season, he finished 10th in scoring with 16 points. Never playing with the Canucks, they decided to cut ties with White by trading him to the San Jose Sharks. After White finished college, the Sharks declined to offer him a contract, which led him to go ahead and sign in Germany, and since then he's gone to play in Slovakia, Austria, Sweden, and France. Because White was a first-round pick, San Jose then received a second-round pick as compensation for not signing him. With that pick, the Sharks selected Chris Tierney, who became a full-time member of their team midway through the 2014-2015 season, so it's safe to say the Sharks lucked out. The Las Vegas Golden Knights. Now, unlike the Seattle Kraken, the Vegas Golden Knights have more of a complicated draft history since they came into the league in 2017. So rather than talking about draft busts, let's talk about how they've managed to draft some unbelievable players, but then traded them away for veteran players who could help them compete in the moment. At the time of the 2017 draft, no one expected the Golden Knights to be a Stanley Cup contending team right out of the gate. They drafted Cody Glass, Nick Suzuki, and Eric Brandstrom all in the first round. This trio was expected to be the future of the Golden Knights. However, the Golden Knights were competitive right from the get-go and traded these young players for win-now guys such as Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone. Glass and Brandstrom are still finding their footing in the NHL, but Suzuki has become a top-line center and the captain for the Montreal Canadiens. Then in 2019, continuing the trend of selecting great players in the draft but trading them away, the Vegas Golden Knights traded away Peyton Krebs as part of the Jack Eichel deal, and Krebs is currently playing as a third-line centerman for the Buffalo Sabres. The Washington Capitals, Greg Jolly. In 1974, the Washington Capitals were joining the NHL as an expansion team and were granted the first overall pick in the draft. With that pick, they chose Greg Jolly. Jolly came into the draft hot, coming off a 92-point season with the WHL's Regina Pats, followed up with a 20-point playoff performance in 16 games. He led the Pats to a Memorial Cup championship and was named the MVP. It's safe to say going into this draft, he was a hot commodity. It was said to be that Jolly was going to be the next Bobby Orr. However, looking at his NHL career, he had 97 points in 365 games played, so I think it's safe to say that Jolly did not live up to this hype. Throughout his career, Jolly was bouncing around between the AHL and the NHL, with the majority of his time spent in the AHL. On top of that, he did not spend a lot of time in Washington. Jolly just played 98 games, collecting 33 points and racking up a whopping minus 116 with the Capitals before they traded him to the Detroit Red Wings. He spent the rest of his career with the Red Wings organization, winning 2 Calder Cup champions in the AHL. The Winnipeg Jets, Patrick Stefan. Now, before the Jets came back into the league, they were the Atlanta Thrashers, and it just so happens that they had one of the worst first overall picks to ever happen in NHL history. The 1999 NHL draft is arguably the worst in history, and it starts right off the bat with the Atlanta Thrashers selecting Patrick Stefan. It's even worse for the Thrashers when you look at who was taken after him in Daniel and Henrik Sedin. Patrick Stefan played for the Long Beach Ice Dogs of the IHL prior to playing in the NHL. The IHL was then considered the second best league in the world, and Stefan, despite being held to just 33 games in his draft year due to a concussion, was an all-star in this league. Stefan then spent just 7 seasons in the NHL, 6 of which with the Thrashers and 1 with the Dallas Stars, where he will forever be remembered for one of the worst mistakes in NHL history. Patrick Stefan never scored more than 14 goals or 40 points in a single season. Overall, he was a disappointment in his NHL career, but he can't entirely be held at fault. Plain and simple, he should not have been selected first overall, and this was just straight up setting him up for failure.